Quick heads up, this next story involves serious illness and talk of giving up. Please skip ahead if that's not for you tonight. Among night shift nurses in Tochigi Prefecture, there's a rumor about a hospital rooftop that stays open to all and patients who come back against the odds. New staff get told this story. You're about to hear it. This is survival rate. Stage 4. The 5-year survival rate is about 5%. The doctor informed me of that in a dry, businesslike tone. It was the spring of the year I turned 42. Using being busy as an excuse, I dawdled and skipped my health checkups for years. Then last winter, my boss finally scolded me, and I went reluctantly to be examined. Abnormalities were found. I was sent back for further tests. After a whole series of detailed examinations, what was waiting for me was an utterly unexpected diagnosis: bile duct cancer, and that hollow little number, 5%. Why me? Work was going well, family was going well. I mean, it's odd to say it myself, but I've treated other people kindly, and I quit smoking as soon as our first child was on the way. So what exactly did I do? How does it make sense that the probability I'll still be alive in 5 years is only 5%? Anger, sorrow, resentment, every negative feeling you can imagine in this world rose in me incessantly, one after another, from the moment I woke up to the moment I lay down at night. On a friend's recommendation, I transferred to a hospital rumored to have a high cure rate for cancer. Even after the transfer, when family and colleagues came to visit, I put on my bravest artificial smile and tried not to show any weaknesses. That act became stress of its own, and before long, I found myself seriously considering ending my life. Thinking about it now, people are a deeply strange species. Even though I did nothing, there was a 95% chance I would die in 5 years, the moment death came close enough to touch, so I started to pull it closer, with my own hands, searching for a way to take my life. Perhaps I really was cornered badly at that time, because I was trapped in thoughts like that. Of course I was unmotivated about treatment. Maybe it was the mental strain, but the medicine hardly seemed to work at all. Each day I could feel the illness swallowing me, a little at a time. Then one day I finally went up to the hospital roof, looking for a place to die. If I'm gonna die anyway, I thought, and for the first time in 10 years, ever since my wife became pregnant with our eldest son, I drew cigarette smoke slowly, deeply, into my lungs. As I did, memories came back, exactly like a revolving lantern. How desperately I'd quit for the sake of our child. How later a daughter was born, the entrance ceremony, the kindergarten recital, those little scenes, and the tears came on their own. When I finish this, I'll go. Just then, while I was sunk in what I assumed to be the final sentimentality of my life, a child appeared from who knows where, and suddenly spoke to me from directly behind. "Mister, are you gonna die?" I was so startled I nearly lost all strength. The girl was about the same height as my eldest, so probably in the 4th or 5th year of primary school. She was wearing pajamas, so I assumed that she must be an inpatient here. "You shouldn't be up here. It's not a safe place for kids. Back to your room now." "Mister, are you ill? Is it cancer?" She kept firing off these blunt questions, almost as if she found it fun, and I even began to feel a little angry. "Are you crying, mister? Even though you're a grown-up?" "Huh. I didn't cry. Not even at the very end. If I cried, it would only make everyone around me sad, right? So I held it in." The words at the very end snagged on something in me, but I told myself it was just how children speak and to let it pass. "Why are you crying, mister? For your wife? For your kids?" "For all of it." "No, I don't think so. It's for you, isn't it? You just feel sorry for yourself. Your wife and your kids, none of them want you to cry, do they? If you cry, it makes them even sadder. So if you die up here, I think they'll be more sad than now. Much more." Her words stabbed into a place deep in my chest I'd never managed to reach by myself. And since you work so hard to quit, you probably shouldn't smoke anymore either. She said that, and she went back through the door leading downstairs. She's right. Being lectured by a child like that, what am I doing? Ashamed to the core of how self-centered my thinking had become, I threw the cigarette pack and the lighter straight into the bin. I returned to my room. While tearing up the will I hidden under my pillow, a cool thought crept in. How did that girl know I had quit smoking years ago? After a while, the head nurse came round on her temperature checks. I couldn't get the girl out of my mind, so I asked the head nurse in a casual, offhand way. Head nurse, the short head girl, about 4th year of primary school, in pink pajamas with a floral pattern. What illness does she have? I immediately regretted asking something so foolish. That sort of thing is personal information. There's no way she'd tell me. But the head nurse began to speak about the girl, as if it was the most ordinary topic. Oh, so you met Saori-chan. Saori-chan was hospitalized here more than 20 years ago. She was such a strong child, and it must have hurt terribly. Progressive pediatric cancer. But she used to say that if she cried, she'd lose. Even with drugs so harsh they'd make an adult give up, she kept at it and kept at it right to the very end. She didn't complain once. At that phrase, to the very end, it wasn't hard to imagine what happened to that child. While she was in the hospital, Saori-chan would often slip past the nurses and go up to the roof to look at the sky, the clouds, the stars. At the time, for safety management, the hospital had considered locking and closing the rooftop, but because of Saori-chan, they simply couldn't bring themselves to do it. What surprised me most wasn't the content of what she said, it was how the head nurse had talked about the connection between me and a girl who had died in the hospital 20 years earlier, as though it were a familiar, everyday sort of occurrence. After that, I abandoned those weak thoughts and became more proactive about treatment. As a result, I made a recovery so remarkable it even surprised the doctors, and a few months later I was officially discharged. If I had stayed there, trapped in that dark frame of mind, I'm sure the version of me that exists now would not be here. When I think about it, a hospital where the roof is freely accessible is quite rare, and yet there haven't been any cases of someone jumping from the roof, nothing like that at all. And the so-called survival rate here is said to be overwhelmingly higher than in other hospitals. Maybe, just maybe, the Saori-chan I met on the roof that day after she passed away became an angel, and even now on that same rooftop, she continues to encourage patients who feel like their illnesses are about to beat them to reconsider doing something irreversible. Thank you, Saori-chan, for teaching me not to give up and giving me my life back. When I was in elementary school, we were digging in the school's vegetable garden one day, when something unusual came up from the soil. It was a small ceramic fox mask, pure white, made from kawarake clay. Hi, Jay here. Kawarake refers to unglazed earthenware, often used for traditional sake cups, offerings, or rituals in Japan. Back to the story. A fox's face, styled with slanted almond-shaped eyes and narrow features. Us kids kept digging and we found more things. There were these little clay figures of the lucky 7 gods, a miniature magic mallet from folklore said to grant wishes, and other charms and figures which were meant to bring good fortune. We were just kids, so we naturally thought, this is treasure. Everyone grabbed something they liked. There had only been one fox among the finds, and I was the one who dug it up, and I didn't want to let it go. And besides, the other kids said things like, its eyes are horrible, it's creepy. But that didn't bother me. I thought it looked beautiful in a strange way, so I happily took the fox home. Even the teacher who'd been standing nearby watching us didn't tell us off or tell us not to take it away. For a while I kept it carefully wrapped and tucked into a drawer of my desk. But a few years later, after I started middle school, I saw a TV program about Ningyo Kuyo, a ceremonial offering and disposal of dolls, especially ones thought to have absorbed human attachment or spirit. Watching it, I began to wonder if maybe I should do the same thing for my little fox mask. I asked around, what were those things we dug up in the school garden? None of the adults seemed to know. But a few said if something had been buried in the earth like that, maybe it would be better to return it to a shrine rather than keep it in your home. And by coincidence, my family had a trip to Kyoto coming up. The fox figure meant Inari in Japan. Inari or Kami is the kami deity of fertility, prosperity, and agriculture, and foxes, kitsune, are considered the deity's messengers. So I thought, if I'm going to return it anywhere, the right place would be an Inari shrine. Not just any Inari shrine. The main one, Fushimi Inari Taisha in Kyoto. I didn't exactly want to give it up, but I felt like the time had come, and visiting Fushimi Inari sounded exciting. On the day of the trip, I wrapped the fox very carefully, so it wouldn't break, and I slipped it into my bag. Once I was on the Shinkansen, I fell asleep almost immediately, and that's when I had the strangest dream. In it, I was still on the train, exactly like in reality, except the carriage was empty, except for me and a young man sitting directly opposite. He had light brown hair, he wore jeans, and he had a plain white t-shirt, and on his wrist was a purple wristband. His skin was pale, like porcelain, and he was looking at me with an awkward, slightly troubled expression. He said, "Listen, going to a shrine is fine, but don't take me to Fushimi. I mean, think about it. If somebody suddenly told you you had to go meet some big, important person, wouldn't you feel uncomfortable? I just want to stay in my hometown. Just take it easy. Please." That purple wristband, I realized in my dream, was the exact same color as the cloth I'd wrapped around the fox mask years earlier to keep it from getting scratched in the drawer. And when we reached Kyoto, we still visited Fushimi Inari Taisha, but I didn't hand over the fox mask. Instead, I asked one of the shrine attendants, "Hi, I have something like this. What should I do with it?" And they told me, "You should dedicate it to your local Inari shrine, or to your Ujigami-sama, the guardian deity of your neighborhood." So I decided to take it back home and just do that. The night before I planned to go to my local Inari shrine, I had another dream, and that same man, that young man I saw on the train, he appeared, and this time he smiled and said, "Thanks for everything. Here, I'm going to give this back to you." And in the dream, he handed me a purple wristband. The next day, I took the fox mask to the local Inari shrine and offered it there. I'm sorry, it's not particularly a scary story, but it was very strange, and it's something that stayed with me ever since. Again, not frightening, just strange. I grew up in a mountain village right on the prefectural border, a place where mountains closed in from every angle, hemming us in, swallowing the horizon. For us kids, the mountains weren't just backdrop scenery. They were everything, a playground, a secret world, sometimes even a place to hide. One evening when I was in elementary school, I got in trouble at home. I'd done something bad. I can't even remember what it is now though. But my parents had had enough. My father shoved me outside and locked the front door. I sat there on the porch, pounding the door, crying until my voice was hoarse. I begged them to forgive me. Promised I wouldn't do it again. But the lock never turned. No footsteps came. At some point, I just gave up. The sun was slipping behind the ridgeline. It was getting dark. The air was cooling with that damp smell you only get in the mountains. Feeling small and ashamed, I wandered off into the woods. There was this massive tree up the slope, not far from the edge of the village, and at its base, the roots twisted in such a way that they left a hollow, just wide enough for a child to crawl in and curl up. That hollow had always been my secret place, my little fort, when I wanted to escape the world. That night it became my bed. I climbed inside, pulled my knees tight, and listened as the sounds of the mountains transitioned. Daytime cicadas gave way to the rasp of crickets. Something scuttled through the undergrowth, maybe a beetle or a mouse. The air was thick with the smell of earth, pine needles, and something faintly sweet that I couldn't quite place. I was exhausted, and sleep took me quite quickly. When I opened my eyes, the forest floor was covered by the morning light. My back ached from the hard earth, and for a moment I forgot where I was. And then I noticed them, right at the mouth of the hollow, placed carefully, as if waiting for me, were 3 chestnuts, still in their spiny husks, damp with dew. I knew I hadn't put them there, and the woods around me were silent. I was starving though, so I cracked one with my teeth and hands and I ate. They were sweet, softer and richer than any chestnut I'd had before. And when I stumbled home, I thought my parents were going to be relieved, but instead they shouted at me all over again. They'd spent the whole night searching with the neighbors. Lanterns and flashlights had combed the woods until dawn. I tried to explain that I was in the tree roots the whole time, I never moved. But they only shook their heads and told me off for lying, because they swore they'd checked the hollow more than once, and I hadn't been there. Even now I don't really understand. I remember crawling into that hollow, waking up with the chestnuts waiting at the entrance. So why did the searchers swear that the tree was empty? And who or what left those chestnuts for me? Sometimes I wonder if it was just a kindness. In Japanese folklore, chestnuts have long been seen as the food of the mountain, tied to autumn festivals, offerings left at shrines, even sustenance for spirits. Hunters used to leave them at certain stones, calling them gifts for the kami. So maybe the chestnuts were meant as protection, a way of saying, "You're safe here tonight." But another thought lingers, one that I can't quite shake either. What if they weren't a gift, but a claim? Something in the mountains took me out of sight, hid me away from the eyes of my own family, and when it was done, it marked me with food to eat that wasn't mine. I'll never know. But sometimes when I walk alone in the mountains, or I smell chestnuts roasting at autumn festivals, it kind of makes my stomach turn. Hi, Jay here. Before we get stuck in Tokyo, Maru no Uchi, OL, means the classic office district look by Tokyo Station. OL means office lady. Think glass towers, banks and trading floors, neat blouses, pencil skirts, heels, light perfume. Keep that picture in mind. It matters for what happens next. A few years back, I was doing weekday training hikes on the easy low mountains along the Odakyu line. They're popular because access is quick and the elevation is kind, so lots of beginners and women's groups use the course. On weekends they're lively. On weekdays the foot traffic thins out to a trickle. That day I set off alone. Late morning, cool breeze, dry trail. Perfect. A veteran day hiker came up fast behind me, nodded and said, "By yourself? Take care." I thanked him and watched him peel off at a junction for a longer ridge traverse. I stayed on the gentler, scenic loop, like most casuals take. Wide path, mixed cedar and broadleaf. The trail opened up to a view. I settled into an easy rhythm. A few minutes later, I saw, 50 or 60 meters ahead, the back of a woman walking alone, and I actually paused. A woman solo isn't unusual now. It was what she was wearing. White blouse with big frills, a fluttery floral skirt to the knee, high heels, a small shoulder bag, full makeup, hair carefully curled, starting to come undone at the edges. The whole thing looked like someone had cut a person out of Marunouchi sidewalk and pasted her onto the dirt path with roots and horseflies. And when I drew close, I gave the usual trail, "Hello," and she blinked as if the greeting wasn't expected. I then passed, and I kept a soft lead so I could glance back without hovering. A faint line of perfume hung in the air behind me. That elevator lobby scent really doesn't belong out here with the leaf mold and the cedars. At first she managed, but then the heels were punishing. She started stopping more often, hands on thighs, and then finally crouched at the edge of the path. And that was the point that I turned back. I swallowed the obvious questions like, why that outfit? And I asked if she was okay. She gave a polite, office floor smile. But up close, I saw the office details you don't usually catch in the woods. Tiny earrings, a thin chain at her neck, catching the sun like a pinprick, lipstick still neat, though the foundation on her face had gone patchy with sweat. Do you have any water?" I asked her, and she shook her head once. Small. I handed over my unopened bottle, and she hesitated, but she took it with both hands. "Take small sips," I said. "Let's get into some shade," and she nodded. When I asked if someone knew where she was, she tilted her head. Polite, I guess, but mostly distant, and said softer, "I'm okay." A woman's hiking group came up from below. There were 5 of them, I remember. Hats and poles, friendly faces, and I waved them down. I said, "Come over," and I explained things. We did the sensible things, you know. We moved her to the shade, checked her for blisters. She had them. Gave her a second small drink, offered a snack for salt. One of the women tried asking gentler questions. She asked the office lady when she'd started walking and how long she'd been out here, whether she had a phone. I remember the office lady's answers were neat and very short. She wanted to be left alone, that was clear. So I headed off. I made it to the top, and I ate a quick onigiri, and I headed back down. I met the group again at the bend. They said they found her, not far below, sitting now, knees together, heels crooked off her feet. One of the women asked the question the rest of us were circling around. "In those shoes, in this outfit, what brought you up here?" The office lady smiled, that practiced bright smile, and said clear and steady, "To die." It was like the air itself etched in, no theatrics, just that sentence. She told us that she came on the morning train, and a sudden thought came to her. She'd seen an ad in the carriage for this hiking course, and she stepped off her usual commute, didn't go to work that day, and headed straight here. She said it all gently, smiling. We did the basics because the basics matter, of course. We called Hyakutoban 110, kept her shaded, kept her sipping water, kept her talking about neutral things, low-stake things. Where the view on this mountain range was the nicest, how the breeze felt, whether the necklace she had around her neck was a gift. And when the rescue team finally came up, we made space. I gave a brief account, when we'd seen her, what she'd said, and what we'd tried, and then stepped back with the group so that they could do their work. I still turn over that day in my head. I don't know what happened to her afterward, but I hope she got some help, or I hope she's alright at least. I also think about how easily I could have decided don't meddle and walked on, and how fast a small decision like that can matter on a weekday trail where there isn't a crowd. People treat these low mountains like parks because the trains make them easy to get to. Well, they are easy until they aren't. Once you're 10 minutes from a station, the rules change. Water really matters on a hot day like it was. Shoes matter. Daylight matters. Strangers matter. I guess the takeaway from my experience is, if you ever meet someone walking towards you on a mountain path, stop, maybe. Ask how they're doing. Offer some water. Stay a moment. Even if the first answer you get is just, "I'm okay," it's better than, I came here to die. People in our hometown still tell this one. The names and homerooms wobble depending on who remembers it. But the spine stays the same. A girl who liked control, a coin game with a polite alias, and a house that kept its lights off longer than felt normal. It was about 30 years ago, when I was in middle school. Kokuri-san had a quiet boom then, though teachers had started giving speeches about dangerous games, so we called it other names. Angel-san, Cupid-san, like putting a sticker over the label, changed the contents. In our group, the one who kept pushing for sessions was Haruka. She was rich in the way that you can tell at a glance. Brand stationery, the good bento boxes. She was always going on a trip, and sharp in the way people learned not to test. If she turned on you, you ate lunch alone by the end of the week. The first few times the 10-yen coin moved. Not dramatic, just small, definite glides that make you want to believe there was intention. It answered nothing questions cleanly enough that we could pretend. Then it started going slack. It would drift, stall, land nowhere. By the 4th or 5th try, we were half laughing and half bored. After school clubs were starting, people wanted to go. "We're doing it wrong," Haruka said, already flattening a fresh sheet. "We keep calling anyone. That's like dialing random numbers." "Well then who?" I asked because everybody else was looking at their notebooks. "You know the accident?" she said in that lower register people use when they think they're saying something smart. "The intersection with all the flowers?" We all knew it. A graduate from our school, Sasaki, had been hit and thrown into the oncoming lane, where an oncoming truck finished him. For a week you could feel the air change a little when you walked past. Even the loud kids went quiet in that corner. "Let's call him," she said. "He's still close." Everyone said no. Too much. Disrespectful. Don't do it. But Haruka had a record. People she disliked stopped showing up. Saying no to her always felt like stepping onto a moving belt. Once you were on, you went where it took you. In the end, we didn't say yes, we just didn't hold the line on no. She pressed our fingers onto the coin. "Sasaki-san, if you're here, let us know by moving the coin to yes." The coin slid. Not a twitch, a glide. The room changed shape, quieter without getting quieter. Someone near the window breathed out through their nose like they'd been holding it in. "Go on," Haruka said. "Ask." No one wanted to touch the center of the thing we'd done, so we asked around it. "Will next week's schedule change? Is the cafeteria doing curry next week? Who's going to be MC for the assembly?" The coin answered, but it felt slow, like it didn't like being made to talk about it. My finger joints had that light ache you get when you've held them tense for too long. Haruka waited for a lull and said almost casually, "Sasaki-san, where are you right now?" The coin hesitated, but then crept to the letter. It didn't build a clean sentence. It paused on "i," went elsewhere, then came back and hit "ta." It did that again. "I, ta, ita, ita, itai." Pain. That word means pain. A small sound slipped out of someone's throat. We all pressed harder without meaning to. "How long did it take?" Haruka said. Same even tone. The coin stuttered and scuffed the paper. It scraped across the kana in a way that felt too human to be a draft in the room, or to be one of us. I realized I was pressing so hard that the skin above my fingernail had gone completely white. "Did anybody help you?" she asked. The coin swung to "na," then "i." It parked and trembled there. "Nai. No." "Please stop," I said, quiet enough I wasn't sure she heard. Haruka tilted her head, like a lab tech waiting for a reaction. "I'm sure, Sasaki-san, there were loads of things you still wanted to do. Do you have any regrets?" How can you ask that, I thought. People were crying now. No words were being said anymore. It was really disturbing. And then the coin started moving in a nonsensical way. Look, a simple yes or no to these questions would do, Haruka said, and gave a small laugh. She asked 2 or 3 more needling things. What was the last thing you saw? Do you remember the color of the truck? Do you want us to call someone? Until we were all saying please out loud, we want to stop. Only then did she lift her finger. Why are you crying? She's just a ghost. Like a dead person could do anything to us. You know what? You'd hate it if someone called you, I said to her. Well, I don't think I'd feel anything, she said, and began packing away the coin and the paper like we'd just finished a worksheet. We walked home under that grey bright sky that looks like rain and doesn't. Saturday was a half day back then. We even had to go to school on the weekend. But Haruka didn't come that day, which wasn't really any groundbreaking news because her family went away a lot. But she didn't come in on Monday either, or Tuesday, or Wednesday. A teacher, when cornered between periods, said only what the office knew. Family reasons. When someone pressed. This was before privacy got so formal. He said that the parents told the school, "We're going far away." Our friend group just decided to believe the trip. That night my older brother came in from his jog and shut the door with both hands. He stood there, like he was deciding whether to sit or keep standing. Then he finally said, "What's going on at Haruka's house?" I didn't know what to say. Then he told me. He'd run his usual loop and then stopped at the bank of vending machines near her road. Haruka's place is behind a wide metal gate with a sensor light that fired for moths, cats, wind. It was show-off lighting. You could wave your hand at it from the pavement and it would click on. A young man came from the wrong direction. Not from the bus stop, not from town. Hood up, arms folded like he was keeping in his ribs. He made these low sounds, like he was rolling words in his mouth. No one really walks around there at night, but my brother watched without meaning because it was odd not to. The man reached the gate, and the light didn't come on. Weird, my brother thought. They always leave that thing on when they go travel. The man opened the gate. It wasn't locked. He walked to the front door. The house was dark, but both cars were in the drive. He took the handle and turned it, and the door opened. And he stepped inside. "Inside," he said, in that tone you used to call someone 2 rooms away. "Haruka-san, you can hear me, right?" My brother said. There was something about the calmness of it that made the hair on his arms lift. "See?" the man said. "This is pointless. If I want to come in, I can. Locks don't matter." On the threshold lay ofuda papers, flattened underfoot, powdery lines of salt smeared where shoes had crossed them, charms taped, crooked where tape had given up. He gestured down at them. "These don't work, you know. You waited too long," he said like he was explaining procedure. "I could go up tonight, but I want you to understand first. What I told you before, none of this keeps me out anymore." He stood there with his head angled as if he was listening for an answer, but the house stayed quiet. "All right, I'll come back." He pulled the door shut, and my brother moved behind a utility pole because suddenly he needed to have something solid between him and that voice. The man walked past, making that small, thinking noise under his hood, and from inside Haruka's house came the tidy clack of locks. 1, 2, 3. At the gate, the sensor light flashed on as he left, and that's when my brother ran. He said his legs picked the route home by themselves. He tried to laugh when he finished, said the worst part was leaving his change in the vending machine. The laugh was hollow and it died halfway. I told him what we'd done with the coin. He looked at me like I'd knocked some shrine over. "Tell me you're joking," he said. "I'm not," I said. The teacher announced it first thing next morning. "Haruka is transferring. Effective immediately, she will not be coming back to class." There was no class photo, no goodbye homeroom. At break, our group got called to the staff room. The teacher handed us plain envelopes. "From Haruka," he said. Expression turned down to neutral. He claimed he didn't know the contents. We opened them together, in an empty room with the windows cracked. The handwriting, it was the same for all of us. It looked like a mechanical pencil pressed too hard. It starts small, a tap on the glass. If it does, don't answer. It'll come to your house too. Do your best. It's your responsibility. We read it twice because we didn't know what to think. The room smelled like curtain dust and old erasers. A stone hit my window last night, said Kenta, the quiet boy up front. Just once. I didn't look outside. No one blamed the wind. No one said cat. We just sat there with the pressure a train leaves after it passes. And in that kind of silence that makes you aware of the hum of lights. After that, nothing that would make a teacher call home ever happened to us. No footsteps in the empty hallways, no coins moving by themselves, but small things rearranged. Some nights there'd be a knock on the glass, and only one. The sensor light at my place came on, for the mailman every day, and then, once, didn't for someone else. A stranger stood at the far end of our street with his arms folded, in that way you do when your chest hurts. He wasn't there when I looked again, and a month later, someone said they heard that Haruka's family had left the country. Someone else said they'd only moved across town and they were living under a different name. That's how these things behave, you know. I kept the letter at the back of a pencil case until the case itself got thrown out. I don't touch coins for that kind of thing now. Not even as a joke. If the apartment is perfectly quiet and the aircon casing gives one clean knock as it cools, I turn up the TV a notch without even thinking. If there's one knock on the window and only one, I don't check. And you don't open the door to see whether or not the lock works. You don't answer a first tap to see if it's real. That's the version I know. The rule doesn't change. It's the same line she wrote in pencil. Don't answer. If anyone tries to call you by name, don't move your finger. And if it comes to your house, let the sensor light tell you who it's for. This happened the other day at the cinema. I like going to the movies and I often nip in on my own after work if something catches my eye. One day I realized a film I'd been meaning to see was finishing its run that weekend, so I decided to catch the late show by myself. My usual spot is the multiplex attached to the shopping center by my nearest station. On weeknights it's pretty quiet. That night, because it was the last week of screenings, it was practically empty. Even when the start time rolled around, there were only 4 or 5 people scattered throughout a 200-seat theater. The trailers ended, the lights dipped properly, and just then a man, in his 40s, an office worker type, sat down next to me, in the seat immediately to my left. It's all assigned seating at that cinema, so he must have deliberately chosen the chair right next to mine. I couldn't work out why anyone would do that, with so many empty rows of seats all around. Maybe he was particular about the exact position he wanted to sit in. If it's busy, well then fair enough, but with a room this big there was no need for us to sit shoulder to shoulder. I picked up my bag and I moved to the middle row, 2 down from where I had been before. I didn't care if I seemed rude. My intentions were good. We both would enjoy the movie more with a little more space to use the armrests or whatever. Nothing much happened until roughly the middle of the film. Then, just as it was edging to the big final stretch, a thin, dragging breath came directly behind me. No one should be sitting there. I checked with just my eyes, only slightly tilting my head, keeping it mostly facing forward. The man who had taken the seat next to me had relocated and was now directly behind me. Why? I didn't have an answer. What I did have was a rising, simple kind of fear. In a dark theater, having someone right at your back, it's its own sort of threat, is it not? My brain started throwing up horrible possibilities. What if he had a knife? And because the film itself was a thriller, That feeling stuck and started multiplying. I couldn't sit through it. Even though the film had finally got good, I decided to move again, and I aimed for a seat near the front by the entrance, one with the wall at my back so there would be no one behind me. I stood up and walked down the shallow steps, lit only by the footlights. Something was off there. When I looked from above a minute earlier, there hadn't been anyone around the seat I was headed for. Now I could see the top of someone's head, a dark shape. I had that prickle of bad expectation at that exact moment the head turned. The man, who should have been behind me a second ago, had somehow got there first. He was already facing me, smiling with this damp, twitchy grin, like he'd been waiting for me. My body went for the exit. I shoved through the door, stumbled into the bright corridor, and then my feet tangled and I hit the floor. "Are you all right?" A staff member hurried over, concerned. I sat on a bench in the corridor for a while to get my breathing under control, sipping on a cup of ice-cold water that one of the members of staff handed me. Eventually the screening I'd been in let out and people started filing past me. But the man who sat next to me, he never came out. I watched that doorway until the last pair of shoes squeaked past and the sound from inside went to a hush. Nothing. Since then I've been stuck on what he was. The boring answer is a creep who knew the layout of that cinema better than me. He ducked out a side exit by the screen, slipped into another auditorium, or took the staff stairs while I was still on the floor catching my breath. He moved like someone who'd done this before, maybe just testing for reactions. Another thought though, a staffer out of uniform. Some cinemas have plain clothes, checks for phone recording, and nuisance. If he was security, why would he choose to sit right beside me in an empty hall? And then play musical chairs? And why that smile? There's a local rumor about that multiplex. Someone collapsed during a screening years ago. A late show with a small audience, and the seat was kept off sale for a while. Or maybe it was simpler, a person not quite well, riding the dark because it's that one place that no one looks at you in the face. Someone who wanted to be near, then nearer, then ahead of me, like he needed to be where I was, or where I was about to be. I didn't see him leave. There was no coat brushing past, no shoes on the stairs, no silhouette in the exit glow, just the blank mouth of a door, and the last score bleeding out into the corridor. If I'm honest, that's the part that keeps me out of the late shows now. Not the smile, not even those knife thoughts, just the sense that he finished his route, but I never got to see where it ended. I was in Thailand for a few days, and I decided to spend some of them in Khao Yai National Park. A simple wander, nothing too scary. I set off from the Klu Ai Mai trail ahead, just after noon. Sun high pressing heat down, wet leaf mold smell, and strange new bug noises. The kind of sticky air that makes your shirt cling to your body after about 5 minutes in it. Later I found out you're not supposed to go alone because big snakes are common. That was news to me afterwards. What happened though didn't feel like any encounter with a snake. With my phone's GPS, I figured I had a safety net. I let the busy part of the path thin out and followed a smaller trod that looked obvious enough. Damp roots, faint prints, a plastic bottle cap someone had booted off to the side. The light shifted greener and flatter under the canopy. It still felt like midday, until, at some point, it didn't. Somewhere in there, the soundscape blinked off. One step it was birds over insects in a messy chorus. The next step was blank air. No chitter, no chirps. Even the trees seemed to stop creaking. I remember it so clearly. From far ahead, I heard a clean, hitting sound. Clean, hard, Like wood hit with something smooth, it rang and died. My first thought was it was fruit falling, or a branch snapping back. I waited. Nothing. I took 3 more steps. Then from behind me, from roughly the same distance, I heard another clean hit. I turned, trying to line it up with a trunk or a snag of bamboo. Before I'd settled on anything, a third strike came far off to my right. Same pitch, same distance feel, same single hit. A bad feeling built in a very steady way. I decided to turn around and head back towards the main trail while I still could. I'd just rotated when the 4th hit came from the left, well out there, like a point on a big circle. I felt as if something had sketched out a ring around me with me in the middle. I kept my steps quiet, heel down softer than usual, and the knocks began to come at regular gaps, one at a time, never twice from the same spot, each strike coming from a new position. I couldn't see anything moving, no birds panicking up, no leaves shaking in that way that matched the sound. And I had a thought, is this a signal? Some kind of ritual? And immediately I disliked that I'd given it a name. The impressions piled up. The ring was tightening, each strike slightly closer than the last lap. My palms were wet. The phone in my hand showed the same blue dot, but the tiny arrow would nudge and lose its nerve, pointing nowhere for a second before drifting back. I took my passport, my wallet, and my phone out of my pack. I tightened the strap on the phone so I wouldn't drop it, and I left my pack on the ground. I didn't know how fast I'd need to move. Suddenly. Then I went down low, knees, elbows, then belly, and I tried to crawl towards where I believed the main track was. I wanted to be as low to the ground as possible, so I would be harder to detect. I was freaking out. I knew about snakes, in the abstract at least, but the idea of staying upright inside that moving ring felt worse than the idea of leeches or something hidden under the leaves. My shirt was darkened with damp soil. I kept my breathing shallow because it sounded too loud in the quiet. One part of the circle slid close. The next hit had a heavy body to it, a really loud one, 10 meters, maybe less. It had the shape of wood on wood, but not the texture. No thunk of fibers, no rattle of loose bark, just a single bone-clean note, like the sound of a firework. The strikes moved on, leapfrogging. Then they came round again, tighter. They were not frantic, exactly, more like a measured closing. When the nearest part drew a little away, I risked a crouch and a short, soft-footed run to the next tree. Then back down, the phone screen showed me 40-50 meters to the line I wanted. Another big knock landed to my right, very clear now, and an answering one hit directly behind me. When it finally thinned is the best way I can put it, I suppose, the ring loosened. The next knock landed further out again, and the next a little further. I didn't want to wait long. I used the gap and I walked fast, then faster, not running exactly, but on the edge of it, picking the clearest line through roots and vines. The air didn't warm or brighten, it just refilled with little sounds in bits. The tick of something in leaves, the low hiss of insects at a distance. I reached a part of the trail I recognized by a split trunk, and then the wooden step-downs. And after that, the main path where my footsteps sounded normal again. I didn't look back, but when I got to the parking area, I sat on the low curb and let my hands shake it out. A ranger walked by and told me, calm voice, friendly English, that solo hikers should avoid the deeper sections at midday, then added almost as an afterthought, big snakes. I nodded, like that had been the point all along. What I think it was, and what I don't. Now I've had time to try and sort things into piles. Here's a couple of theories that I guess could have been making those noises. Nature doing what it does, bamboo can knock, trunks can flex, seed pods can pop, and heat can make wood ping. But that consistent pitch, the way it changed position in a clean sequence, and the closing circle, And that's a lot to ask from chance. So, when wood really hits wood, you usually get some kind of rattle, a splash of debris, or a creak before or after. I didn't get any of that. Animals. Gibbons call, hornbills wing slap, macaques throw things, deer stamp. None of these match that single perfect note, with no other cues. No chatter, no wing rush, no branch shake, and that insect silence felt like a blanket someone laid over the place. People. Rangers don't really run practical jokes in snake country. Poachers signaling, maybe? Possible. But the spacing felt too even, and there's no reason to ring a random hiker, unless the aim is to terrify without a payoff. I never saw a person or a tool, and in that distance some tell should have been presented, like, I don't know, a cough, a radio chirp, some footfall. Local beliefs, which I'm really trying my best not to treat like props. If you tell it that way, it reads like Phi, P-H-I, spirit. Warning or hurting, don't go there. The ring tightens, I get pushed out, and when I obey, it loosens. If that's the reading, I was lucky it wanted me out then, not down. I don't know, I just know the organization of it was the scariest part, and the sense that something had a plan, and I happened to be in the middle of it. My family house is in the countryside, and it's an old, sprawling place. The main house is actually connected directly to the storehouse. The storehouse has always been a cool place, even in the middle of summer. On hot days, I'd often go there and take naps. I don't know if all storehouses are built this way, but ours has a section of floor with a kind of vent, a square frame of wooden slats laid over a woven mat, like a rough covering of straw or tatami. Air circulates up through it, and if you lie down on it, the breeze seeps through and cools you from below. It feels amazing. Though there's always that unsettling sense that if you shifted wrong, the whole frame might just give way beneath you. One day, stretched out there, half dozing, I noticed something I hadn't before. Up above, near the ceiling, or rather, the underside of the roof, there was a square panel cut into the beams. Later, I asked my grandmother about it. She told me that the attic had been used for storage, and heavier things were once hauled up through that opening with a pulley system. I hadn't known that. Curious, I asked her how to get up there, and she showed me. I climbed into the attic for the first time. Dust lay thick over everything. Mouse droppings scattered on the floor. The smell was stale, like paper that had been rotting for decades. But there were trunks, chests, old tansu drawers. Objects piled up, half forgotten. I rummaged through them. There were relics that made my stomach tighten. An old map. The Japanese Empire dyed blood red across the continent. Worn leg wraps, gaiters. The kind soldiers used to wear. They'd belonged to my grandfather. Holding them in my hands, I felt caught between amusement and unease. Each object seemed to breathe a life I couldn't see anymore, like voices still trapped in the dust. I lingered too long, maybe, lost in the past, but when I finally made my way back down, I noticed something I hadn't before. The entrance I had climbed up was not the pulley hole in the ceiling I'd seen earlier, but a separate hatch designed for ladders. This one could be locked from below, and around its edges, gouged deep into the wood, were scratches, long, furious scratch marks. I crouched to look closer, and they weren't random. They looked deliberate, like someone had clawed desperately at the floor, trying to dig their way out. The marks were small, much smaller than my hand. 4 or 5 fingers had raked the wood again and again. I asked my grandmother about it, but she only frowned, shaking her head, saying she had no idea. After that, I began looking more carefully whenever I went back up there, and one day I found something else. Caught on a high ceiling beam was a long strand of hair, black, brittle with age, but unmistakable. The beam was high, at least 2.5 meters up. You'd have to climb or stand on something tall to reach it. No one just bumped their head on a place like that. And when I looked again, I saw it was directly above the pulley opening, the place where the heavy loads were once lifted up. Of course, it made sense that the pulley rope might catch loose strands if someone was hauling bundles of clothes or bedding. That's the explanation I told myself. But paired with the scratches around that locked hatch, the image became harder to dismiss. Maybe the pulley rope had been used for something else, but what connection would it have to the hair? Unless someone hung there. I pushed that thought to the attic of my mind. I didn't like that. Sometimes I wonder whose hair that was, whose small hands tore at the wood until the nails split. Relics of war were up there, maps of conquest, a soldier's gear. The attic was a grave of forgotten things, and maybe among them was something no one wanted to remember. This is a story from quite a while back. Please hear me out. I went to visit a friend who lived in a 1-room, 3-tatami place. Rent was 30,000 yen a month. It was winter, bitterly cold, but once the two of us started drinking in that tiny room, it was surprisingly comfortable. Except for this, every so often a cold draft would slide in, like a thin blade of air. The building was old, sure, but the window frames were new aluminium sashes. I couldn't figure out where that air was getting in from. After a while drinking, curiosity got the better of me. I asked my friend about it. He said he was used to it. It's always like this, don't worry. After I used the shared toilet on the landing, I noticed something odd. The apartment was 2 stories. At the top of the stairs, the toilet was to the right. To the left, there was a corridor about 10 meters long with rooms on both sides. From the toilet looking left, there were 2 rooms. To the right, 3 rooms. I had always thought the room in the middle, on the right side, was my friend's, or so I believed, but on the right side, there were only 2 doors. Because the left side had the staircase, the corridor was narrower there, so I figured they'd just made 2 slightly larger rooms on the left and 3 smaller ones on the right. At the end of the corridor, the door to the back left room faced you. Opposite that door, on the right-hand wall, was just wall, and not just any wall. From the far end, roughly 3 meters, that wall jutted out about 10 centimeters into the corridor. The corridor was narrow already. That portion was even tighter. Back in the room, I asked my friend. Let's call him Kenji, but he said he'd never noticed. Fair enough. The bit in question was beyond his own door. Most people don't pay attention to what's past their room, I guess. I leaned out of Kenji's window and checked both directions along the exterior. There were windows exactly where you'd expect. 1 on each side. No mistake about it. Next to his room, there had been another room. I wasn't going to be satisfied until we looked into it properly. The wall on that side of Kenji's room was built as a 2-tier oshire, a sliding door closet, so we emptied everything out of it first. At the very back, there were narrow matchboard panels, about 20 centimeters wide, set side by side. From the gaps between them, cold air was slipping through. So that strange draft we kept feeling was coming from here. I put my eye to the gap, but it was pitch dark. There was nothing to see. If the space on the other side was also a wardrobe, then with the fusuma, the sliding panels, closed, you would never see anything, anyway. Even Kenji, who's normally unfazed by this kind of thing, started to look uncomfortable. From outside, the hidden room's window couldn't be seen because other buildings blocked that view. In any case, if we were going to investigate, daylight would be less unnerving. We made a plan to visit Kenji's building in the light of day. The next day we returned and resumed our investigation. Even in daylight, the gaps in the backboards were utterly black. We tried a torch, but the slits were too narrow to get any light in at a useful angle. While we were checking the corridor, the neighbor from the room opposite came out. We explained the situation. He said it never struck him as strange. That made sense. Only a tenant would know a room's inner layout. From the corridor, it just simply looks like a larger, single room. You wouldn't guess that there's an extra, inaccessible space. In other words, only someone living in Kenji's unit would ever realize there was a hidden room there. The corridor wall itself felt solid, and was painted the same color as the walls. Apart from that odd section that jutted out, nothing looked amiss. There wasn't much more we could do on our own, so we decided to ask the landlady about it. The landlady, Sato-san, was a kindly-looking woman in her 50s, but when it came to the mysterious room, she wouldn't say a word. She told us to ask the management company. At the management office, the assigned staffer, Tanabe, came out and right off the bat started talking about the hidden room. So the landlady must have phoned ahead. He gave us a bunch of small explanations. The short version, it isn't a room at present, it's just being used as a storeroom. He didn't explain the lack of a door at all, though. As far as I know, it's always been like that, ever since I joined the company, he said. Maybe a contractor's mistake during work, he added, like he was thinking out loud. After that explanation, he pulled out the lease and said, "Look, we can reduce the rent to 25,000 yen. How about that?" Kenji said that he needed some time to think and went back to the apartment. On the way back, we decided that we were going to enter the adjoining space, that hidden room, to have a look for ourselves. If we found anything bad, Kenji would cancel his lease. If nothing turned up, he'd stay put, with a little discount on his rent. To be honest, we also wondered if in a pinch we could secretly use that space next door without anyone knowing. That was our thinking at the time. It looked like we could get in by cutting the matchboard at the back of the oshiire, the wardrobe. So we went to the hardware store for some tools and got started right away. We were seriously determined to find out what was in there. We figured we could just repair any damage ourselves and no one would be the wiser. So we chose 2 boards from the upper tier. They looked the easiest to work on. First, we used a hand drill to make a hole about 3 centimeters across. Then we started cutting from there with a saw. The boards were only about 1 centimeter thick, so I thought it would be quick. But we were amateurs. It didn't go fast. We relied on the drill a lot. And eventually, by around 4 o'clock, we'd opened a hole, roughly 50 centimeters tall by 40 centimeters wide. We started at around 2, and it had taken 2 hours. While we were working, we noticed something stuck to the back of the boards, mixed in with the sawdust on the drill, and the saw teeth. There were bits of paper. When we pulled the boards free, we saw what it was. Ofuda, paper talismans. That gave us pause. It felt a bit reckless to keep going. But for the time being, we decided to go in. As our eyes adjusted, the outlines of a dim room emerged. It looked to be about 6 tatami in size, a corner room with 2 windows. Both of those windows were boarded over with plywood. The front door to that space was still there, but judging by the corridor outside, it probably wouldn't open. Then we noticed something odd about the walls. There was a pattern. We clicked on the torch and swept the beam across the wall, and we sucked in a breath. The pattern was hundreds of those ofuda, those paper talisman, pasted all over the walls. They were on the door, the boards blocking the window, even inside the wardrobe opening, where my head was poking through. Everything was smothered in talismans. I stayed where I was, locked up by a kind of fear that felt very old and very practical at the same time. From behind me, Kenji called out. He told me to move so he could see. We swapped spaces at the hole. Once he saw inside, he was speechless. We decided to enter and take a proper look. Kenji was first through that narrow opening, then me. We climbed into the room. Inside, talisman were pasted on the floor and the ceiling as well. Every inch of the room was covered. White ones and red ones all jumbled together. Apart from that, there was nothing in particular. No furniture, no smell of rot, just talismans and sealed openings. Kenji looked like he was already weighing up whether to move out. And that's when there was a bang, a huge one. It came from within the room. We stared towards the sound, but there was nothing there. Then the same sound could be heard again, from all around the room in quick succession, so strong that you could feel the vibrations in the boards. It was the sound of something very heavy striking the walls. It felt like blows were coming from the inside. The noise and the tremor grew and grew until it seemed like the whole building was shaking. Standing up became difficult. Both of us lunged towards the hole we had created in the closet at the same time. As we scrambled to squeeze through, something grabbed my ankle. Kenji's hand, I thought, and yanked. I fought to get free. Panic makes you use your elbows, and I tumbled into Kenji's room. Kenji was already inside, safe. More than that, he was in before me. Then he said, "Why did you pull my leg?" I stared at him. I mumbled something about being flustered and let it drop. There was a commotion outside, so we went out. People from the building and nearby residents had gathered in a small crowd. Apparently the banging and shaking we'd experienced inside had been audible outside as well. Everyone was alarmed. We played along, talking with worried faces, and little by little, people dropped off. Back in the room, we put the matchboards back, fixing them with a sheet of plywood and the nails we bought. Originally, we planned to just cap the opening with plywood, but the ofura pasted to the backs of the boards bothered us, so we nailed the boards onto the plywood first, and then used the plywood as the cap. Kenji grabbed as much as he could carry and came to stay at my place. The next day he cancelled the lease, hired movers to handle everything, and never went back there. I didn't go near there again either. Why am I remembering all this now? Because I met Kenji the other day. These days we each have families and live far apart. But he had a business in town and messaged me. "Let's get a drink." First time in 15 years. We swapped old stories from our student days and stupid things we'd done, and eventually we got to that apartment. The memories came back in sharp detail. Kenji said he'd gone to look for it a few years later. It was in Sangenjaya. There was nothing left of how it used to be. Not just the building, the road itself had been redone. He couldn't even pin down the spot. Hearing that, I felt an odd sense of relief. Time had dulled it a little, but the place that felt like the source of that fear was gone. After that, we chatted about nothing in particular, and around midnight we called it a night. But there was only one thing I think we both always wanted to ask. A question from right after the incident. A question that had never gone away. For myself, I knew the answer. As for Kenji, I was sure. No, certain. He had the same answer. After what happened, we never went on trips together. And both of us always wore socks. Always. In fact, the way we wore socks all the time, no matter how hot it was, might be what settled it. I think Kenji wanted to ask me, "Do you have it too? The hand-shaped bruise on your ankle?" This is an experience from over 10 years ago. When I took a bike I was looking after for a senior, I had it for a year and a half, and headed out on a night ride. I left Chiba City and reached Katsura a little after 2 a.m. On the way out, I'd used a busy main road, so there were plenty of cars going my way and oncoming. I was passing other vehicles all the time. For the return, I deliberately chose a mountain road with little traffic. I cruised the national route from Katsura towards Kamogawa, then from around Amatsukominato, I turned off onto prefectural route 81. The whole road is paved, but it threads through narrow sections that feel like a mountain path of forestry road, which makes it great fun on a bike. In daytime, I'd taken it many times. It was one of my favorite courses. I hear there's a wide, proper tunnel there now. But back then, the only tunnel was a narrow thing that looked hand-dug. and going through that at deep night was seriously frightening. It was so tight, it felt like if you were driving a car, you'd be scraping the ceilings or the sides. The lighting in there was poor, and it sat in a place where, even if you had an accident, no one's gonna notice, until the morning at least. Up to then, I never once seen anything like a ghost. I'd even heard that if you don't see one by adulthood, you never would. So I didn't feel that ghostly fear of night roads at all. But that tunnel, if something showed up in there, it wouldn't be surprising. That was the only place I was thinking about, can I pass through that calmly or not at night? And that's when it happened. Long before that tunnel, I'd worked my way through a winding narrow stretch, then crossed a spot, squeezed down to almost one lane, where they seemed to be repairing a landslide. Past that, a straightaway of about 30 meters appeared. I flicked on the headlight to high beam. It picked out the railing of a bridge at the far end. The instant I saw that bridge, I had a powerful, bad feeling hit me. Before I knew it, I'd grabbed the brakes hard, like a panic stop. The road surface was a bit wet, so the rear tire slid, but the bike still stopped in the shortest distance. The headlight dimmed, pulsing brighter and darker with the idle. The road ahead, floating faintly into view, bent sharply right just before the bridge. So from where I was, it felt like I was seeing the bridge side on. It ran away toward the right back and into the trees, and I could only see a small part of it. Even dimmed, the area the headlight hit was as bright as if a flash had gone off. Outside that cone of light, there was pitch black, an ink-dark space that looked like it refused living people. Up to that spot just before the bridge, there had been weak street lights at reasonable intervals, but for some reason the bridge section had no streetlight glow at all. Maybe the bulbs were dead. I stayed put, trying to figure out why this felt so wrong. But other than missing lights, nothing really looked that off. I set it back into first gear, eased out the clutch, and as soon as I began to roll, that crushing sense of rejection came back, and I couldn't bring myself forward. I stopped again. Still, in the area, I could see nothing. I glanced at my watch, just past 2:30 a.m. I considered a U-turn, going back the way I came, but it was all downhill, and the lane was very narrow. Even on a bike, I'd have to do several back and forth movements to turn around. More than that, I just had a feeling that I didn't want to be fumbling around in a place like this. By now, my whole body was yelling at me to get away. Ignoring that instinctive aversion, I dropped into gear and pushed through. As I approached the bridge, its shape came clear. Still, I didn't see anything strange. Feeling silly, I crossed in one go. Then once over it, I stopped and looked back. Again, nothing. I stayed there a bit, watching, relieved, wondering what all this unease had been. I faced forward again and checked the rear view mirror one more time. There was blackness behind me. But at that moment, something white slid across the front. A chill ran straight through me, and I jerked my eyes towards it, and in that instant, the engine stalled. The headlight held the white something for a beat, and then it faded out fast. I was in the dark. The shock ripped a shout out of me, and I spun into a panic. I don't know about other bikes, but the one I borrowed cuts the headlight with the engine, so I was wrapped in total darkness. Hands groping, I found the Kickstarter pedal and worked like mad. Once, twice, 3 times. Only that hollow drum sound echoed out, no sign of catching. But with each kick, the headlight flickered dimly for a moment. And in that window, I could make out the outline of a person in white clothing ahead. 5 or 6 meters away, maybe. It looked like the back of a woman with long hair, in something like a pale, one-piece dress. Staring straight at the shape, I was thinking, why won't you start? I opened the throttle a touch and kicked hard again, and this time the engine caught. But once the headlight was fully bright, it lit up empty air. That white back, which had been so solid a moment before, had vanished. There was no one ahead of me. I did not want to go any closer to that spot, but turning around here scared me too, and I didn't think I could bring myself to look back into the pure black behind me. I stayed put, unable to move, unable to do anything at all, trying to analyze what I'd just seen, even supposing it was a real person, in a place this dark, on a lonely road like a forestry track at 2:30 a.m. Would a woman be there alone, with no light in hand? No matter how I turned it over in my head, it didn't seem possible. And standing there, turned away from me at the edge of a road, not moving, that didn't feel like something a living person would do. On top of that, dense trees lined both sides. Even if she had slipped into them, there's no way she'd disappear this completely in that short of an instant. Shaking, stuck there, going forward or back both felt impossible. When suddenly, right by my ear, I heard a woman's hollow voice. Clearly. "Help me look. I just can't find it." I think I heard something more after that, but by then, I wasn't staying put. Like a racer when the green signal lights, I launched out of there and left that place, not looking back once. After that, nothing else happened. I got home safely, and I didn't feel any strange after effects. But I never figured out what those words at my ear meant. At the time I searched online, but I couldn't find any reports of incidents or accidents around that bridge. But maybe something happened there in the past. Maybe even now, in the deep of night, she's still out there, still searching for something she can't find. From my last year of high school, and for a few years after, apparently my doppelganger would show up from time to time. I've never actually seen it myself. The first person to see it was my mum. She said she stirred awake in the middle of the night, and there I was, standing at the foot of her bed. After that, there were sightings from friends and from a senior at my part-time job. Every time it happened, though, I had to defend myself and explain where I actually was, which got exhausting. The worst of it was my mum. She became convinced I was skiving off school and wandering around town, doing whatever I pleased. It's absolutely unfair, that. I wanted to chalk it up to mistaken identity, a lookalike in the wild. But even my mum said she'd seen me more than once, and that makes the odds of a simple coincidence feel pretty thin. The last reported sighting was a few years later, after I started working. A colleague said he spotted me in the middle of the night, standing by the vending machine. He called out, and I apparently answered him normally, full of conversation and all. Next day he asked me, "So, what'd you end up buying?" And I was confused. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I asked for the full story, and he said he chatted with me about drinks, and that I was torn about what to choose. Since then, there haven't been any more sightings of the doppelganger. Or maybe I just haven't been told. And it really freaks me out to think that there's someone out there that looks exactly like me, talking to my friends and family, and getting up to who knows what. Hi, Jay here. If people are seeing you when you weren't there, what are they exactly seeing? A ghost? A split soul? Or could it be a glitch in the system that tells the brain where you are? Hold that thought as we dip into a theory I found in search of doppelganger stories that tries to explain why some who meet their doppelganger later die, and why the explanation might be scarier precisely because it's just so ordinary. Be warned, this gets a little morbid, so if you don't feel like hearing that right now, skip to the next story. There's a theory about what a doppelganger really is. Even in pitch darkness, when you can't see a thing, you know where your hands and your feet are, right? But when autopsies are performed on people who said, "I met my doppelganger," and then died, it's said that they had tumors in the brain, specifically in the area of the brain that governs the function of knowing where your body is in space. It's a kind of hallucination in which you see your own body, also called autoscopic hallucination. A double that looks exactly like you, a second self, a wandering spirit. The term can also refer to the phenomenon of the same person appearing in another place at the same time, sometimes in multiple places, including cases witnessed by third parties. So is it a brain error or an abnormality? In other words, if a tumor forms in the part of the brain that handles body position awareness, your ability to locate yourself can become impaired. As a result, you may feel that you are over there, in a place different from where your physical body actually is. That, the theory goes, is the true nature of the experience of meeting your own doppelganger, experiencing yourself as existing somewhere else, or seeing you apart from you. Later, as the tumor grows large enough to disrupt brain function, it can become the cause of death. The chain of events is said to be the origin behind the phrase, "If you meet your doppelganger, you'll die," which is something I've seen quite a lot of in these Japanese stories. I'm not sure if that's the same worldwide. Let me know in the comments. That said, it isn't clear how far this theory has been rigorously tested, because how can you? Anyway, I found an account that I think kind of lines up with this theory. My cousin has a brain tumor and has had 2 surgeries so far. At first, his crash was written up as a single vehicle accident caused by dozing off at the wheel. People assume that because he'd already been nodding off at work from time to time, that it was just fatigue catching up on him. However, after he had the same accident a second time and was brought to the hospital again, the doctors said, "Twice is strange," and ran through tests and discovered the brain tumor. They told him that it's in a bad spot and removing it completely will be difficult, and there's a high chance that it will reoccur. Sometime later, when we went back to the countryside for a memorial service, not for him, another family member, I took the opportunity to ask how he was doing, and he said it's not that I just fall asleep, and I asked what he meant by that, and he told me something different than he'd been telling his doctors. He told me that he ran himself over with his car. I was taken aback when I heard that. He said that while he was driving, he suddenly appeared in front of the car, and he hit himself. He jumped out and searched for any sign of damage, marks, debris, a body, anything, but there was nothing. Was it just a hallucination, he wondered? But around the same time, he was seeing himself standing outside his house. And he even said that he got phone calls from himself. When these things kept repeating, he went back to the hospital. They found that the tumor had recurred. After that memorial, he was scheduled for a second surgery. As an aside, during that period, my cousin had become startlingly overweight. Later, they found that the tumor was pressing down on the part of the brain that controls hormones, and that pressure was the reason he gained so much weight. After they removed the tumor, he slimmed down naturally, no special diet needed. So, it isn't only tumors. Some kind of error or abnormality in the brain can cause things like this too. I heard of a case where a rape suspect's personality completely changed after he had a head injury in an accident, and there are reports that a high percentage of people who committed mass murder show abnormalities in their brains. Vision, hearing, consciousness, hormones, and thus body shape, and even personality, and sex drive are also produced in the brain. That's why brain tumors are truly terrifying illnesses. Closing thought to ponder on here though. If the brain writes the map of where I am, then a tiny smear on that map might be all it takes to draw a second you. Whether that makes the legend less supernatural and more unsettling, I'll leave you to decide when we move on to the next story. This happened more than 20 years ago. Back then I was in junior high, but I had a morning paper routine. It was a bit cheeky for a middle schooler, but I wanted some extra pocket money. My assigned area was actually tiny. One big apartment block, and a couple of small houses around it. That was it. So it wasn't the hardest job I ever had. The story I'm about to tell you happened in the big apartment block. For the time, the building was unusually tall. It really stuck out in the area. You could see it from far away. It was just sitting there, above everything else. Because of the height, there had already been several instances of people taking their own lives from the upper floors. You know, people jumping. We all knew about it. And of course, once that kind of thing happens, you start getting the usual rumors. Strange shapes on the roof at night, weird noises in the stairwell, that kind of stuff. So when my route got changed, and I was told, "You'll be doing that building from now on," I honestly hated it. I didn't say no out loud, but inside I was like, why me? Out of everyone, why me? I gotta be like the youngest employee. It took over a month before I stopped being scared every single morning. Even when I got used to it a bit, it never really felt comfortable in there. It was more like, okay, at least I can walk around without wanting to cry today. The way I did deliveries in that building was always the same. First, I'd take the elevator all the way up to the top floor in one go. Then I'd work my way down using the stairs. Top floor, deliver to that whole floor, go down one level, deliver, go down one level, then all the way to the ground floor. It was efficient, and once I got into a rhythm, I could finish the whole block pretty quickly. One morning after I'd finished my usual route and stepped outside, I suddenly realized I'd forgotten one extra job. That day, there was one household that was supposed to get a special envelope together with their paper. I think it was movie tickets or something, and I'd been trusted to deliver it. Anyway, I'd completely forgotten to put it in, so I had to go back, and their apartment was on the 11th floor. Now, normally when I was working, I only used the elevator at the very beginning to shoot all the way up to the top, and then I'd use the stairs on the way back down. I never bothered writing it down. But since I was already tired, and I'd done my job, I'd finished the whole route once. I wasn't going to walk all the way back up there again just to be noble. So I got back into the building, took the elevator up to the 11th floor, slipped the envelope through their mail slot, and walked back towards the elevator area. When I got there, the elevator was stopped at the top floor, one level above me. Next to the elevator doors was a stairwell entrance, just a few steps away. You could always tell if someone was on the floor above or below you. Footsteps on the stairs, voices, the small sounds of people moving around. This time, there was nothing. No footsteps above, no voices, no clack of shoes, no rustling, no plastic bags or doors opening and closing. If someone had been waiting up there in front of the elevator, I should have sensed it. What I'm getting at is if someone was waiting up there in front of the elevator, I should have sensed it. But it felt like the whole building was silent. I pressed the button and I watched the digital display. The lift started moving down from the top floor. Then right before it would reach 11, it stopped at the 12th floor, the floor above me. This building had like 15 floors. I remember thinking, huh? Who got on? Because there had been no signs of anyone on the stairs or the landing up there, no sounds of anyone coming up, no coughing, no slippers, no nothing. But the indicator clearly showed it had stopped at the 12th floor and was heading down. Yeah, I didn't hear the doors slide open, and I didn't hear them close. I didn't hear any footsteps of anyone stepping in, no weight shift, no small mechanical sound that usually comes with people getting in or getting off, just the indicator moving like someone had pressed a button there. Now, I don't have the sixth sense or any special sensitivity or anything like that. I'm just one of those people who never sees or hears anything normally. Even so, at that moment, I had this really strong, heavy feeling in my chest, like the air around the elevator had thickened somehow. Every hair on my arms felt uncomfortable, like they wanted to stand up. I didn't run for the stairs or anything. Honestly, I just couldn't decide what to do. It's pathetic in a way, but the best way I can describe it is my fear arrived faster than I could move. So I just stood there on the 11th floor, newspaper bag over my shoulder, watching that elevator indicator and waiting for the elevator to reach my floor. My body felt weird. My hands and legs were prickled and my skin broke out in goosebumps. The whole time I was thinking, don't open. Don't stop here. Just go past. Go down to the bottom floor or something. But of course it didn't. The light changed. 11th floor. The elevator chimed, and the doors began to open. And before I could even see inside, the feeling hit me. It was like all the tiny hairs, not just the ones on my arms, but on my neck, my head, everywhere. They were pushed right up from the inside. Not just I got goosebumps, more like my whole head was suddenly too tight for my skull somehow. This was the first time in my life I'd felt anything like that. The doors slid fully open, and there were two people inside. One was a short, slightly chubby woman in what looked like an orange raincoat. Another was a little girl, wearing the same kind of raincoat but in pink. They were standing side by side, holding hands, facing the back wall of the elevator, so from where I was I could only see their backs. They didn't move. They didn't flinch when the doors opened. They didn't look at me at all. Raincoats indoors, early in the morning, in an old apartment elevator, it already felt strange. The fluorescent light inside the lift made the colors of the raincoats look a little bit faded and dirty, like they'd been through a lot of bad weather. From the moment the door opened to the moment it closed again was probably only 10 to 20 seconds, but it felt drawn out, too long. In those 10, maybe 20 seconds, nothing about them changed. They didn't turn around to check who was getting on. They didn't shift their weight. They didn't even breathe audibly. They didn't react to me at all. Just two figures in raincoats, hand in hand, completely still, taking up the center of the elevator. If they were alive or dead at that point, I honestly didn't care anymore. My brain had already decided, I'm not setting foot in that elevator. I stepped back without even thinking about it and then headed straight for the stairwell. I took the stairs down, heart hammering, probably skipping a few steps as I went, and I ran back to the delivery office. And I got there and I told them right away that I was quitting. I didn't hedge it or explain it nicely. I was quite a headstrong youth. My boss tried to calm me down, told me to at least finish out the month, but I just ignored him. I just kept saying I was done. I went home after that without doing any other deliveries. Later on, after I calmed down a bit, I asked some of the other delivery guys about that building. Now, nobody said that they had had the same experience as me. No one else said that they'd seen the woman and the girl in the elevator like I had. But I did hear this. A lot of people had quit after taking that block on. Some said that they'd heard strange voices. Some said that they'd seen something weird in the stairwell or at the end of the corridors. No one stayed on that route for very long. And when I think back to it now, I still don't know if that woman and girl were ghosts or just two people standing in a very strange way in the wrong place at the worst time for me personally. Whenever I picture that elevator, I always realize the same thing. In a normal elevator, if you're already inside, the doors start to open. Most people at least glance at whoever's waiting outside. But those two never did, and I never heard them get on. They didn't look at me. They didn't move at all. Not once. This is my first time posting. My writing's rough, sorry, but I'd be grateful if you read this. This happened around May last year. Late at night I was at home on the internet when I heard, from outside, an old woman singing. Now my house is in a residential area. That said, it's the countryside kind of residential area, dim and a bit lonely, even with houses around. Every now and then you get a drunk who sings on their way home in the middle of the night, so I figured this was just another drunk. But then I thought, an old woman doing it? Isn't that a bit strange? And I couldn't shake it. I hurriedly threw on a jacket over my pajamas and I went outside. Since she was an old woman, I figured her walking pace would be slow, and the song still sounded close to the house. I turned right at the T-junction just by my place, and there she was, her back immediately in sight. I tried to walk without making any footstep sounds, heel to toe, but for some reason she turned right around to face me. I planned to observe without being noticed, so the sudden turn startled me. The old woman stopped singing and asked, "Who's there?" I answered for the moment, "I live nearby, I just came out for some night air, just taking a walk," with a smile. We were about 5 meters apart, but she started coming towards me. She held out something small and said, "For you." On reflex, I took it. What I took had a small rounded weight to it, and it was wrapped in plastic. A bit bewildered, I told her, "Thank you," and I turned back towards home. There's a utility pole with a streetlight right in front of my house, so I checked what I'd been given under that light. It was a hard candy, the old-fashioned kind twisted at both ends, of a slightly stale-looking plastic wrapper. Feeling thankful, I went to eat it right away, and I pulled both ends of the wrap to open it. What came out when I opened the plastic was a rusted hex nut. Surprised, I dropped it, and without picking it up, I reflexively looked back towards the T-junction from earlier, and there she was, the old woman peeking only her face out from behind a wall, looking this way. I was about to go straight into the house in front of me, but then I realized if I went in like this, she'd know which house was mine. So I didn't go in. I walked past my place, turned left at the next crossroads, and stood there for a bit, thinking, is that old woman still there? How long should I wait here? There was no end to questions like that, so I decided to grow some courage and go home. I went back to the crossroads and headed for my house again. At the T-junction, there was no sign of the old woman anymore. Hands down, that was the weirdest interaction I've ever had, and I really don't want to run into her again. I have no idea what that wrapped up hex nut and candy was meant to be. A big part of me thinks that she expected me to eat that, and that's why she hung around to watch. This account was copied from a lined A4 notebook left on the last mountain bus from the Hot Spring Street. The driver logged it as lost property for a week, but nobody claimed it. A regular commuter scanned the pages and re-uploaded the text before handing the notebook back to the depot. There was no name, only a date and the title, Meat House. Landmarks match what locals whisper. Lone Tory on the approach road, a glass lobby, rail pens around the central pit. The handwriting runs steady until the final page, where the lines wobble and end hard. What follows is the notebook typed as found. Hey, you want to go to the meat house? Summer break. I used my holidays to go back to my hometown in Nagano Prefecture for the first time in a while. I usually work in Tokyo, but my family home is in a mountain town. The temperature runs high, but the humidity is low, so it doesn't feel muggy. The Alps run along both sides, laying out a view that's hard to beat. Compared to the city, the climate is comfortable, and that feeling of being home after so long put me in a good mood as I headed for home. Apparently, though, nobody was home. My parents run their own small business, and they were probably out both working. My siblings seemed to be out somewhere too. I thought I'd sit down in the living room and take a breath, but the work I'd been doing up to the other day had caught up with me, and I'd left the house early that morning. Bone-deep tired, I decided to nap a little until my family came back. The ring of the phone woke me up. It was a friend who heard I was back. He called me to invite me out to dinner. I wanted to go eat with my family since I was finally home for once, but seeing a friend is always good, so I said yes on the spot. I hung up and looked at the clock. It was already past 6 in the evening. I'd slept way longer than I meant to. The setting sun had dyed the room orange. The glare made it hard to open my eyes properly. and still there was nobody home. So I washed my face and I texted my mother, saying that I'd be going out to eat. I got ready and drove over to my friend's place. I rang the bell and a familiar face peeked out from behind the door. We traded easy small talk, first time seeing each other in ages, then decided to hit a diner nearby. We ate while swapping old memories and catching each other up on life. Just as we were about to leave, my friend, face lit with excitement, said, "Hey, do you want to go to the Meat House?" Meat House is one of those local haunted spots. It's a ruin, a bit up the mountain from the Hot Spring Street at the edge of town. Rumor says that it used to be a yakiniku, a grilled meat restaurant, that ran into money trouble, and the owner resorted to murder and started serving human meat as product. People around here know this story, but nobody I know had actually gone up there. I wasn't keen at first, but between his persistence and the fact that I don't exactly hate the occult or spooky things, we decided to go. It was past 9 by then. We looked up the location online and headed out in my car. 30 minutes of driving later, we reached the foot of the mountain where the meat house was supposed to be. For some reason, there was a torii gate at the mountain entrance, with the road stretching into the dark beyond. Even with my headlights on high beam, past the torii, it was pitch, absolute black. You couldn't even see a step ahead of you. The map showed the meat house was a short way in from here. Fortunately, the car could make it. No need to hike. I eased the car forward. The fear of not seeing ahead at all, and the nerves about where we were going made my foot let up on the accelerator. The road was so narrow that the only way to drive back down would be to go to a space deeper in and make a U-turn. With visibility like this, backing down the slope would be impossible unless we waited till the morning. We climbed a winding grade. On the left, thick trees fell away and a building came into view. I pulled up alongside it while my friend in the passenger seat lit it with a flashlight. It was a pretty big structure. The walls were white all over, but covered in patches of moss. Where a sign must have once hung, metal hooks sat, eaten up with rust. Right in front of us, a broad lobby-like space opened out, with broken glass scattered here and there. You could imagine it used to be all glass out front, so you could see inside from outside. Deeper in, tables and chairs lay smashed and tossed everywhere. I was sure this had to be the meat house. I cut the engine. Once it died, the silence got even heavier. A forest so still you couldn't even hear insects. I didn't want to switch off the headlights. We were 2 people alone in a lightless mountain. An unnamed dread wrapped around us. And eventually I did turn off the headlights. From here on, the only light we could count on was our 2 flashlights. I lit my watch to check the time. It was already past 10. There was what looked like a front door, but with the glass broken. You could basically step in anywhere along the front. On both sides of the building, the trees grew dense, right up against it. No chance of slipping in around the sides to the back. My friend took the lead and went in. Trash carpeted the floor. The walls were covered in graffiti left by earlier visitors. Even so, it was unnerving. With only the flashlights to rely on, every time the beam moved into a new spot, it was easy to think, what if something was standing there? We went in from the entrance, and a little ways deeper we came into the kitchen. The prep counters were filmed with rust, spiderwebs sheeted the ceiling. No knives or tools anywhere. Like the entrance, it was strewn with instant noodle cups, empty beer cans, and other rubbish. My friend further in swung his flashlight at me and gestured me over. He'd found a way leading deeper in. The door hung by a single hinge, looking ready to fall at any moment. We opened it and stepped into a corridor that ran further in. Maybe 5 meters ahead, a heavy door blocked the way. It was fastened, shut, with a padlock. I checked my watch. It was coming up to 11. I was ready to call it and head back, but my friend, who knows where he picked it up, jammed a length of iron into the padlock and tried to break it with the leverage. I started to say stop, and then A sharp crack of breaking metal ran through the place. I looked around without thinking. That sound. Would it bring someone out here? My friend looked pleased with himself and motioned me over again. Sighing, I went to him. Beyond the solid door was more corridor going back and a staircase going up. Maybe because it had been locked until now, there wasn't any scattered trash we'd seen so far, and nothing smashed up there. We didn't expect the back of a yakiniku restaurant to run so deep, and it threw us for a second. But my friend urged us on. It was late though. I suggested we split up from there. To save some time. I didn't really want to be in that meat house for any longer than I had to. Maybe because he saw the time too, he reluctantly agreed. We decided to do one pass each and meet back here. He went on through the back door and I took the stairs. I looked up into the dark. 5 steps, then a staircase turned to the right. What waited past that turn? Was somebody standing there? Thoughts like that made me slow my feet. I heard a sound of clatter, and I almost yelled. It sounded like my friend had gone on ahead. I steadied myself and started up. Luckily, no one waited past the turn. At the top was a door. I opened it and swept the flashlight around. Several office desks stood in a row. A blackboard and a whiteboard were mounted on the walls. It looked like some kind of office. The far wall was all glass. I went closer and I looked down. From here I could see the first floor. The first floor was a huge room, and the ceiling above it was all glass. And thanks to that, the moonlight fell in and let me just barely make out the space below. It was very big. It was like the size of a school gym. What caught the eye were a few enormous machines, and what looked like straw-like grass scattered everywhere. In the center, there was a circular open area, and around that multiple pens made out of railings. Peering harder, I could see a big square box-like thing sitting in the circular center. From here up, I couldn't tell more than that. I took a moment, thought it through, and figured out what this room had been for. Most likely, meat processing. They'd pen cows or pigs in the fenced enclosures and raise them, then butcher them in the central space. And part of what was butchered got served as dishes. And if the rumors were right, people would have been cut up here too. Maybe even used as cattle. The thought made the place feel even worse. As I watched below, small lights flickered and moved, my friend poking around on the first floor. He was walking near one of the big machines. After a bit, he slipped into the machine's shadow and I lost sight of him. I looked around the room I was in, and then went back down the stairs and waited in the corridor for him to return. I don't know how long I waited, but he still didn't come back. Even for a big room, it was about time. Had something bad happened to him? I raised my flashlight again and then opened the door he'd gone through. I had a rough idea of the layout from looking down earlier. But with my feet on the floor, the scale hit different. The place was big. A passage ran from the door straight towards the back, and at the end there should be that circular area I'd seen from upstairs. On the way, large machines sat flanking the passage. If I shouted his name, I might find him fast, but the place was dead still, and for some reason I couldn't bring myself to call out. So I moved forward, taking care with every step. Maybe he'd jump out of some shadow to try and scare me. With every step, though, straw scraped underfoot. I walked a little way down the passage that stretched from the entrance. I should be coming up on that circular space soon. Just as I expected, it came into view, and the square object I couldn't make out from upstairs began to show its shape. With each step, the square form resolved. It didn't take long to realize what it was. A huge refrigerator. Not a household model, an industrial-size unit sitting there by itself. Why would that be here? It was so out of place it set my teeth on edge. In a place like this, the more out of place something is, the stronger it bites into your nerves. I went closer. The fridge was covered in rust. It didn't look like it was in working condition at all. I grabbed the handle and I pulled. Locked. It wouldn't open. I pushed and pulled for a little while longer, but the door never gave. I turned my back on it to head towards the big machines, where I thought I'd lost sight of my friend from the second floor. And in that instant, a sudden roar made my whole body seize up. It wasn't hard to guess where it came from. Right behind me, the refrigerator. The unit I'd assumed was dead had started up with a deafening fan whir. I forced myself to turn. My legs wouldn't stop trembling. None of it made sense anymore. Why would a dead fridge suddenly kick on? And as I stared at the howling thing for several long seconds, the sound cut. And the fridge door creaked open slowly. A heavy, dull sound rolled through the space. The door swung excruciatingly slowly, as if determined to drag out whatever it was hiding. A familiar pair of eyes, a familiar nose, a familiar mouth, a familiar face. My friend's head was there. We'd known each other since middle school. We'd walked to and from school together almost every day back then, and hung out all the time. For high school and university, we went to different schools. He got a job at a local company, and I joined a firm in Tokyo. Even living in different prefectures, whenever I came home, we would always meet up for drinks. He's the kind of friend you could talk about anything with. His head sat past that open door. Blood ran from both his eyes, and his pupils were skewered in opposite directions. From his mouth, a long tongue stuck out like a snake. It had probably been cut off and forced into his mouth. I lost control of my bladder. The shaking peaked. My legs lost the strength to hold me, and I dropped where I stood. All I could do was sit there, emptied out, swallowed by grief. And then, somewhere in the dark, metal scraped on metal. The sound came from the depths beyond the fridge. From a pocket of darkness the moonlight couldn't reach, I aimed my flashlight towards it, and something began to surface inside the beam. Slowly, slowly. A man holding a terribly long butcher's knife in each hand, wearing a blood-soaked apron and gloves. A woman dressed in clothes, drenched in the same bright red. They were my friend's clothes. In the woman's hand was a human arm. The knives in the man's hand, maybe they were the kind used to take a cow's head. The blades were eaten with rust, gummed with old blood. He was smiling and he just kept rubbing the two knives together over and over. On the arm the woman held, my friend's wristwatch was strapped. She was clawing at it like a madwoman trying to wrench it off. I didn't want to think about what that watch meant anymore. They weren't about to give me any time to mourn. The man raised both blades and charged at me. I lurched up and I ran back the way I came, with all the strength I had. I didn't look back once, I just ran for the exit. Behind me, the crash of things breaking and voices rang out. Over it I heard one clear word.
Itadakimasu.
The man shouted other things too, nonsense. A slurry of words. I burst out of the entrance and I dove into my car. Hands shaking, I forced the key into the ignition. The engine caught right away, and I shot forward. To get back down to the foot of the mountain, I'd have to find somewhere to turn around, so I drove up the mountain. As the winding road climbed, fog began to swallow the world, and visibility almost dropped to nothing. I had no choice but to slow down, and look hard for a spot wide enough to turn around. Easing forward, I came to a heavy iron gate at the end of the road. Chains were wrapped around it again and again, and even if I rammed, it wouldn't open. Seeing that, I stopped the car, and I thought about my friend, and I cried. Through tears, I looked out the window, and then I took out my phone. I crafted an email. To Mum. I'm sorry. Mum, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to head back to Tokyo after all. Something came up. I really wanted to eat your cooking. It's been so long, but I'll just have to wait till next time. I'll come again though, okay? I'm really sorry. I hit send and closed the phone. I know my time's up. I sense a presence. The man who's been standing next to me for some time was watching me. I noticed when I sent the email. He's going to smash the car window. The notebook's last page breaks off there. And that's the end of the account of the meat house. This story starts with a guy waking up in the middle of the night in his quiet, empty apartment. He gets out of bed, walks over to the window and opens the curtain, and what he sees across the way seems normal at first. But what he doesn't realize is that he's already being watched, and by the time he figures it out, she's already at his door. This happened years ago, back when the storyteller lived in one of those old Japanese apartment complexes, big concrete buildings with rows of identical windows and stairwells that echo late at night. One night, deep into the early hours of the morning, he woke up. He wasn't sure why. No sounds, no dreams, nothing strange, just that eerie, middle-of-the-night stillness. He got out of bed, shuffled over to the window, and casually opened the curtain. Directly across from his unit was the stairwell landing of the opposite building. And standing there, right on the landing, was a woman. She looked like a nurse to him. White uniform, small cap on her head, arms at her side. She was facing the stairs like she was lost in thought, just standing there in the dark. He didn't think much of it at first, probably someone heading home after a night shift. He actually felt kind of bad for her. She looked like she was exhausted. He turned away, about to go make some coffee, when something tugged at the edge of his mind, a detail, something that didn't actually sit quite right. The railing on that stairwell, he'd looked at it 100 times before. It usually came up to about chest height for a normal adult, so around 160 to 170 centimeters tall, maybe 5'2", that kind of height. But when he looked at the nurse, he'd seen her waist. Not just her chest, but her waist, which meant she wasn't average height. She was tall, like really tall. At least 190 centimeters, maybe taller, 6'2", something like that. Now feeling uneasy, he went back to the window and he peeked outside again. And this time, she wasn't facing the stairs anymore. She was staring directly at him. And she was smiling, this huge, unnatural, teeth-baring grin that stretched just a little too wide, like she knew he'd figured it out. He panicked, and he yanked the curtains shut. He stood there in silence, trying to process what he'd seen, and then suddenly, the door buzzer goes off, and he freezes. His heart dropped into his stomach, and there's just no way. There's no way that she could have crossed the distance that fast. She'd have to exit her building, cross the courtyard, then enter his complex, find his door, all in a matter of seconds. Trying to steady himself, he crept towards the door and he peeked through the peephole. And he nearly collapsed because standing right outside was that nurse he saw. She had her back to the door, but she was hunched over, her spine bending like it wasn't built for a human body. Her shoulders were curled in, her head low, her whole body just seemed wrong. He backed away, heart pounding, and then he ran for the balcony. He yanked the curtains open again and looked across the way and saw nothing, empty. No one was on the landing. Whoever she was, whatever she was, she wasn't over there anymore. She was here. In full panic, he climbed over the railing and he jumped from the 3rd floor. He hit the ground, rolled, and sprinted through the dark to a friend's place. And he didn't go home until sunrise. And when he did, he found his apartment was quiet. There was no sign of forced entry, no damage to the walls or the door, no tall nurse, no anything. And here's the thing that still messes with his head. He assumed that she was a nurse because of what she was wearing, especially that white cap on her head. But no matter how hard he tries, he cannot remember her face. Only that smile.